Chapter 541. As expected, those bastards took advantage of my absence to lay their hands on my guild. Several files and papers were projected on the holographic projection in front of Edward, whose deep voice echoed throughout the apartment. The more he stared at them, the greater the frown on his face became. "You don't have to worry too much." Standing by his side, Natasha comforted him. "Your daughter is a lot more capable than you think. She may not have handled everything perfectly, but she was still able to deal quite a severe blow to all of the guilds that tried to lay their hands on the Demon Hunter Guild. I would say that she had done a fantastic job. She really did." The news of his daughter's accomplishments made Edward's face soften a bit. As he gazed at all the things she had accomplished during her career, he felt great pride fill him. Despite being just 20 years old, she was able to manage the guild without her father's support and prevent it from being devoured by other guilds. His pride grew for every minute that passed. "You truly have grown up so well, Edward." Jolting him out of his thoughts, Edward suddenly heard his wife's voice. Turning his head, he softly asked, "Yes?" With an uncertain look on her face, Natasha thought for a moment before asking, "You can choose not to answer this, but weren't you supposed to be in the demon world? From what I've heard, you fell into some sort of scheme and the dungeon you were in desync. How is it possible for you to have come back?" Edward's face turned serious when he heard her words. Pondering for a bit, he eventually nodded his head. "There is no need to hide anything from you. Yes, I was indeed in the demon world. So it's true." Natasha's face was filled with worry as she looked at Edward. "But how were you able to escape? I heard that it's almost impossible for someone to come back to Earth once they enter the demon world." "About that." After briefly covering his hand with his mouth, Edward looked at Natasha for a moment before finally telling her everything. From how he had spent several years trying to find a way out, to one day finding himself inside the arena after getting injured in a big fight, and everything else that happened after. The expression on Natasha's face changed when she heard Edward tell about his time with the demons. It became increasingly concerned. Who would have thought that the fights were rigged? Had it not been for Ren who... Wait, did you just say Ren? Cutting Edward off, Natasha's eyes opened up a little bit. "Yes. You heard correctly." Tilting his head, Edward looked at Natasha. "Is there something wrong with him? Had it not been for Ren, I would have never been able to escape the place." After his confirmation, Natasha sat down on a couch with a deep and contemplative look on her face. Finding her reaction strange, Edward sat next to her. "What's wrong? Did something happen with Ren?" "Yes." Natasha nodded her head. Lifting her head up to stare at Edward, she softly mumbled, "It was also because of him that I was able to get rid of the Mind Breaker curse. Visit. For the best no_underfruit_g experience." "What?" Immediately after hearing her words, Edward stood up as his eyes widened. "Did I hear correctly? Did you just say that Rin was also the one that saved you?" With a complicated look on her face, Natasha nodded her head. "Yes." Thinking back at everything that had happened back in Isanor, Natasha's face softened up a little before muttering, "He's a good man." In an attempt to rebuke, Edward opened his mouth. However, as he thought about what had happened in the past and what Rin had done for him, he eventually closed his mouth and nodded his head in agreement. "He is." Standing up from her seat, Natasha checked her watch. "Amanda should be here anytime soon. How about we go to dinner?" "Okay." Knock knock. Having just taken a shower, I opened my room door without too much thought after hearing someone knock. After all, I could only think of my mother knocking on my room door. But it was at the moment when I opened the door that I was greeted by a familiar face. A face that I had not seen for over the past half a year. It was Amanda. It was at that moment that my mind blanked out as my eyes repeatedly blinked. "You." It took Amanda's careful gaze to snap me out of it. With no trace of shyness, she carefully examined my body from head to toe. I felt a little weird. Have you looked enough?" The moment I said those words, Amanda snapped out of it and raised her head to look at me. More specifically my hair, as she asked, "What happened to your hair?" After scratching my face, I glanced at Nola, who had her head turned away from me. It was from that moment that everything started to click for me, as I thought. "It was you." Was Nola going through her rebellion phase? But wasn't that supposed to happen when they were in their teens? An early bloomer? As I stared back at Amanda, I replied in the same way I had spoken to my mother. It's kind of complicated. Vaguely. Complicated. Unconvinced, Amanda's eyes squinted. But she eventually relented and her face softened up a little. Never mind, I don't care if you don't tell me. As long as you're fine, I'm fine. After that, her eyes paused on my body, prompting me to reflexively cover it. Staring at her, I asked, "What are you doing?" "Your scars." Pointing at the scars on my chest, Amanda's brows furrowed. "They're quite a lot. A lot more than when I last saw you." Even though she was trying to hide her emotions, I could tell from her glance that she was concerned. I smiled reassuringly. "The latest episodes are on website. Don't worry about them. I'll get them healed once I get myself a potion. They aren't even that bad, mostly from training. And from my fight against Lightning Dragon. That fight. It really took everything I had to beat him." "I see." Despite not being completely convinced by what I said, Amanda eventually nodded. In her eyes there was a trace of relief. But that didn't last long as a small hand reached out for her pants and tugged them. It was Nola. "Nola." Raising her small hand, Nola pointed in my direction. "Sister. Remember the promise." "Ah." Covering her mouth with her hand, Amanda glanced in my direction. Following this, her face quickly became expressionless. Or rather, it became quite cold. Opening her mouth, she icily said, "It's good that you're back." "Humph." Accompanying her words was Nola's exaggerated snort as she turned her head. For a split second, Amanda's lips trembled. This obviously didn't escape my sight as I leaned against the side of the door. "If you want to pretend to be angry at me, at least try your best to not laugh." "Sister." As she gazed at Amanda, Nola raised her voice. Amanda's face quickly crumbled as she quickly apologized to Nola. "I'm sorry, Nola, but I just can't do it. Why don't you forgive your brother already?" Glancing my way, she gave me a signal with her eyes. With one glance, I understood what she meant and pretended to look hurt. At the same time I did this, Amanda pointed in my direction. "Nola, I don't think this is a very good game. Your brother is very sad that you aren't talking to him anymore. I think he may cry soon." "Cry?" Turning her head to look at me, I secretly channeled some mana and pinched the side of my leg, causing my eyes to fill with tears. "Oh no." In an instant, Nola's face changed as she rushed to comfort me. "Brother, don't cry. Nola was only joking. I'm not angry." "You're not?" I asked as I wiped my tears. Nola repeatedly shook her head. "No." "Then give me a hug." "Okay." Extending my hands, I tightly held Nola in my arm as I slowly stood up. Feeling her squishy body in my arms, I felt a wave of pure bliss wash over me. There, don't cry, brother." Patting me on the head, Nola tried comforting me. Not that I cared as I was trying my best to stop myself from grinning. But it seemed as though I had failed miserably at this as Amanda just shook her head when she looked at me. The latest episodes are on website. I could only helplessly shrug my shoulders. Unfortunately, Nola's charm was that destructive. Coddling Nola for the next few seconds, I suddenly realized something. Staring at Amanda, I asked, "Did you meet your mother yet?" "Mom." Cocking her head a little, she looked at me with a confused look. After a while, she shook her head. "No." My brows furrowed when I heard this. Putting Nola down, I grasped Amanda's wrist and brought her with me. "Come with me for a second." "Wait, Rin." Without putting any resistance, Amanda followed me from behind. She did call my name a couple of times, but I was too preoccupied looking for Edward to notice. "Oh, here." Upon hearing voices in the dining hall, I dragged Amanda along with me into the dining hall. The moment we entered the place, all forms of noise ceased as I felt everyone's eyes pause on me. What's wrong? Why was everyone looking at me like that? But it didn't take too long for me to understand what was wrong as the towel on top of my head fell to the ground. Then, turning my head slightly, my eyes soon paused on Edward, whose eyes were fixed in my general direction. I instantly let go of Amanda's hand and took a step back. "I know this looks weird, but please don't, Ms." As I was about to finish my sentence, Amanda's figure disappeared from beside me and reappeared in front of Edward. As tears streamed down her cheeks, she tightly hugged his body. "Dad." At first she was flustered. Being dragged around by a half-naked Rin would obviously fluster everyone. But from the moment that she stepped into the living room, All of those emotions ceased to exist as her eyes paused toward two figures happily conversing with each other at the end of the dining table. It was as if her body and mind had frozen completely. Is this a dream? Amanda wondered to herself as her eyes lingered in the direction of the two figures in the distance. That sight. It was a sight she had dreamed of since she was young, and something she never believed could ever happen. Mom, Dad. Their presence prompted the two figures to turn their heads and their eyes met. As Amanda's eyes locked onto the man sitting next to her mother, she felt a bolt of electricity run down her body. That figure. The figure she had been longing day and night to see for the past 3 years. I know this looks weird, but please don't miss. Within seconds, her body moved on its own and her body began lunging toward him. Dad. In that moment, Amanda's face sank into the man's broad chest and she felt a familiar warmth, a warmth she had long yearned for. Chapter 542. This familiar warmth is real. It's not a dream. When Amanda looked into her father's eyes, tears began to trickle down her cheeks. It's okay. Wiping the tear away from her cheek, Edward softly smiled at her. It's really me, Amanda. I'm back. Ah. Amanda let out a weak sound as she hugged her father even tighter, trying her best to imprint the warmth inside of her mind. A while later, Amanda opened her mouth. The frail sound of her voice echoed throughout the room. How are you here? How was it possible for her father to have returned from the demon world? Many had told her that this was an impossible feat, something that could never be accomplished due to how dangerous the territory was. Many times she had wanted to go herself, but knowing how weak she was, she could only silently endure the pain and continue training until she became strong enough to go. Yet, feeling her father's warmth, Amanda knew that he was right here with her. This was not a dream. Softly staring at Amanda, Edward opened his mouth to answer. However, Rindover, are you an exhibitionist? Go and put some clothes this instant. He was stopped by Samantha's enraged shout. Turning around, Amanda watched as Rin left the room with a crestfallen look on his face. You think I really did this on purpose? Also, it's not like I'm actually naked. People go to the beach all the time. It makes no difference if they see my chest. As he left, nearly everyone in the room heard his parting words. Heh. Edward chuckled slightly at that moment. With a confused look on her face, she turned her head to look at him. Do you two know each other? Letting go of him, she sat down on the seat next to him. Glancing in her direction, Edward had a complicated look on his face as he nodded his head. You wanted to know why I was able to get out of the demon world, right? Yes. Unknowingly, Amanda's heartbeat started racing as she nodded her head. In her mind, she was already formulating a theory about what had happened. The words her father said next confirmed her assumptions. It's because of him. He helped me escape from the demon realm. As expected, it really was him. Instead of being surprised, Amanda's face turned complicated. She had already formed an idea once her father appeared the same time he did, but being overwhelmed with emotions, she didn't think too much about the situation. However, now that she had calmed down, she was able to understand exactly what had happened. Lowering her head, Amanda glanced in the direction of where Rin used to stand, letting her face soften a little. The edges of her lips curled ever so slightly. You truly are. This is very good. With my fork in hand, I chewed my food politely. Once I finished eating, I would wipe my mouth carefully with a napkin. I also made sure to keep my back straight and hold the fork properly. I wasn't one to eat like this, however, at the moment I felt that I needed to do this. For the sake of my life. What delicacy this is. What is this weird thing? With a slight cough, I swallowed another mouthful. Along the way, I made sure to compliment the food, regardless of whether it was good or not. Unfortunately, isn't that ginger you're eating? I don't think you like ginger, don't you? The dining hall echoed with my mother's voice. My fork froze in place. As I smacked my lips a couple of times in an attempt to get my taste buds to work, I finally tasted the food in my mouth, and from that moment, I had to do my best to stop my tears from falling. I fucked up. Lifting my head a little, my left eye twitched. Nevertheless, I still complimented. Amazing ginger, mother. I don't know how you seasoned it, but I think I no longer dislike the taste of ginger. I didn't do anything to it. Nothing? Then I must compliment you on how well you selected the ingredients. Truly AMA. I ordered them online. Scratching the side of my head, I lowered my head and stopped speaking altogether. I realized that the less I spoke, the better the situation for me would be. And it proved to be the right decision as the dinner continued smoothly after that. The feeling lasted only a short time as my mom's icy words echoed throughout the room. Is that so? So you met Rin in the demon realm? Feeling her intense gaze from the other side of the dining table, I lowered my head even further. Shit. But it seemed as though fate did not want me to do that as Edward continued talking. Yes, if not for your son, I would have never been able to escape from the demon world. Oh my, what a brave son I have. With every word that came out of my mother's mouth, I felt as if a sharp knife was stabbing my heart. Please stop. Lifting my head a little, I pleaded with Edward to stop, but it didn't seem as though he got the message as he continued speaking. In fact, I even fought against your son back in the demon world. At his words, the room froze completely as the eyes of several people in the room opened widely. So this is what your goal was. It was also at that moment that I realized that Edward was not feigning ignorance to my earlier signals, but was actually doing it on purpose. Visit for a better user experience. You two have fought? My mother asked with a rather surprised tone. Feeling her gaze pause on me, I silently glared in Edward's direction. You better stop talking. But unfortunately, my words went to deaf ears as Edward continued speaking. Secretly glancing in Natasha's and Amanda's direction, he put on a hurt look. Your son also beat me quite badly. I was punched multiple times in the face and he also broke a lot of my bones. If not for my sturdy body, your son could have killed me. Oh my. While he was speaking, I suddenly felt Amanda's gaze pause on me. Turning my head, our eyes met. She didn't say anything, but with a single glance, I could tell what she wanted to ask me. Is what he is saying true? Ugh. Groaning slightly, I covered my face with my hand and slowly nodded my head. Glaring at Edward, I was forced to interject. I only did it for the sake of helping you. A smile spread across Edward's face as he glanced at me. I didn't say you didn't. The misunderstanding was finally clarified by Edward as he looked toward the others. In spite of Ren's actions, he did it to save me, so there's no need for you guys to think badly of him. Hearing his words, my eyes began to squint. Just why is he acting this way? It somehow felt as though he was having some sort of vendetta against me. But it didn't take too long for me to understand the reason for his sudden actions. Following his line of sight, I soon realized why. It's about what happened earlier. He had probably misunderstood the moment I came into the room. At least that was what I thought it was. So in order to save you, Rin purposely beat you up? But aren't you supposed to be strong? Once again my mother's words echoed. The smile on Edward's face stiffened a little as he quickly explained. Back then I had my mana sealed and my rank dropped to the same level as Rin. Not only that, but Rin also had a device to stop my man. Sounds an awful lot like you are making excuses for your loss. In the middle of his sentence, Edward was interrupted by Natasha. With a slight smile on her face, she glanced in Amanda's direction. There is no need to be embarrassed, we have all seen Ren's capabilities. It wouldn't be strange for you to lose to him, right Amanda? Alternating her gaze between me and Edward, Amanda eventually nodded her head. Yes. Amanda. Edward pitifully looked at Amanda with a betrayed expression on his face. Despite his reactions, Amanda just ate the food calmly, seemingly unconcerned with his reaction. She looked to be lost in her own thoughts. And just like that, the next couple of hours flew by. By the time it was 10 p.m., everyone had already eaten their fill and my mother was already back in the kitchen, cleaning up the dishes. Whom. Letting out a long yawn, I stood up from my seat. Glancing around the place and seeing everyone still busy doing their own thing, I decided to head for my room. I was honestly quite tired. Stretching my back a little, I walked toward my room. Along the way I thought about the dinner. If I had to be honest, it was a lot more tiring than my half-year-long trip back to the demon realm. In spite of the dangers there, I never felt so tense in my life. Like a hawk, my mother watched every move I made with great attention. It felt as though any wrong move would spell the end of me. Remind me to never do this again. Shaking my head, I entered my room and headed for the balcony. Click. The moment I opened the balcony door, I was left surprised by the sight of Amanda staring at the nightly sky as her figure basked underneath the moonlight, perfectly highlighting her soft and delicate features. My feet came to an abrupt pause. You're here. Turning her head, Amanda glanced in my direction. Staring back at her, I walked toward the balcony railings and proceeded to gaze at the city from the balcony. A momentary silence followed as we both stared at the city below. Breaking the silence, I turned my head to glance at her. You were waiting for me? I was. Resting her head in her arms that were crossed on the balcony, Amanda slightly turned her head in my direction. I just put Nola to bed, and since the two rooms are connected, I decided to head for the balcony to enjoy the breeze. I see. Raising my hand, I scratched the side of my eye. However, her next words caused my hand to freeze on the spot. Do you know? I like you, you know that. As if time had stopped, everything around me faded away, and I could only see Amanda's figure at that moment. Sure. With a slight smile on her face, Amanda pressed her finger to my mouth. There is no need to pretend as though you don't know. I noticed this back when we were at the concert. I wasn't exactly sure back then, but I'm sure now. You know about my feelings for you. Taking her finger away from my mouth, Amanda turned to glance at the city below. Pressing her hands on the handrail, she leaned her body back. The only reason I'm telling you this is because I'm no longer going to hide the fact that I like you. Though faint, a faint blush appeared on her cheeks as the smile on her face deepened a little. I tried. I really did try to stop these feelings from growing. Me with the guild and you with your own stuff. It is really hard to pursue what we really want to do since we are forced to bear responsibilities that others can't, but... With a slight pause, Amanda turned her head to glance my way again. You are making it really hard for me to not like you. Chapter 543. You are making it really hard for me not to like you. Amanda's words echoed inside my mind like thunderbolts as my body stopped moving altogether. Millions of different thoughts flashed inside of my mind as I struggled to speak. She knew that I knew all along? A bitter smile soon spread across my face. And here I thought I was doing a good job at trying to hide my feelings. As expected of Amanda, she was more perceptive than I thought. I was unsure of what to say to her sudden confession as I stared at her. Although I knew that she liked me, I didn't take her for one to express her emotions so suddenly. The Amanda I knew was supposed to be reserved and shy. Not someone that would boldly confess like this. Just what happened during the time that I was in the demon world. Honestly, she had caught me off guard. You don't have to answer me just yet. Amanda let go of the railing before I could say anything else. As she turned away from me, she moved toward the balcony's sliding door. Sorry for dropping off something like that after you've just returned. I just feel like I needed to say it. For my sake. There was a short pause in her speech as she placed her hand on the slider door. I guess I'm selfish in my own way, but if I never did this, I don't think you would have ever though about it. In the midst of my racing mind, a strange feeling overpowered me. Once again, sorry FO. I didn't know when, but before I knew it, I had already taken a step forward and I found myself grasping her wrist. Wait. After my hand made contact with Amanda's, her body flinched and she turned to face me with a surprised expression. Our faces weren't far. About a few inches away from each other. Gazing at her face which seemed to sparkle under the moonlight, I had a sudden thought. Was I always this indecisive? It didn't take long for me to come up with an answer to that question. Yeah. I guess I was. Thinking back, I really did have the tendency to overthink things. But it couldn't be helped. I was someone that liked to have everything under control. Just like in this case, were my emotions real, or were they a fruit of my other self's work? To be honest, this was something that had been plaguing my mind for quite a while. I had long stopped thinking about it because I was busy with other stuff. It only resurfaced recently when I went to the demon realm. At the time, I didn't think about saving Amanda's father when I went to the demon world. How could I have? I had just come off from a fight against the Demon King and found out about the secret of the entity residing inside of my body. The latest understudies are on website. Edward was the last thing that was on my mind back then. In addition to that, I saved Edward back then primarily because the situation back in the Demon Hunter Guild was complicated. It had to be noted that they were the ones protecting my parents, and if something bad happened to them, my family would be put in quite a bit of danger. I wasn't really thinking too deeply about it. And maybe, just maybe, Amanda may have misunderstood my actions. But, taking a deep breath, I slowly opened my mouth to speak. This weekend. I let go of her wrist as I stared deeply into her obsidian black eyes. Are you free this weekend? Like. Closing the door behind her, Amanda stood still while lowering her head. This persisted for a good couple of minutes as she tried to let the events that transpired not too long ago sink into her mind. It really happened, right? She thought to herself. Rin had actually asked her out on a date, right? Within a moment, Amanda's cheeks became hot as her head made its way deeper into her bosom. It really did happen. Recalling his soft smile and warm eyes, Amanda knew that whatever happened back then wasn't a fruit of her imagination. It had actually happened. Knock. Knock. It was at that moment that Amanda heard a knocking sound. Amanda? Are you okay? It was her father, Edward. Placing both of her hands on her cheeks, Amanda hastily turned her head and pressed her hands on the door. I'm okay, she answered in an audible whisper. Is that so? Edward awkwardly said. A weird silence followed his voice as neither of them spoke. After a while, unable to bear the silence anymore, Edward spoke up. Amanda, can I come in? No. Putting more pressure on the door side, Amanda shook her head furiously. Don't come in. Despite feeling sorry for her father, she did not want anyone to see her right now. Let alone her father. Although she couldn't see herself in the mirror, Amanda knew that her expression wasn't quite right at the moment. She didn't want to risk it. Are you perhaps angry at me? Having misunderstood Amanda's words, Edward's voice fell. Calming herself down, Amanda replied. I'm not. Then why? Because I'm about to take a shower. Oh. Another moment of silence ensued as Edward seemed to struggle to find the right words to say. He eventually backed off. All right then, we still have a lot to discuss together. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Good night. Good night. With her back pressed against the door, Amanda closely paid attention to the sound of his footsteps distancing themselves from her room. It was only after she could no longer hear them that she finally calmed down. Slowly, her feet slid down and she hid her face in between her knees. I'm sorry, she silently murmured as she thought back at her father's crestfallen voice. But it really couldn't be helped. She really couldn't bear to let anyone see her at the moment. This is hard. Did I make a mistake? I repeatedly asked myself this question as I stared at the ceiling of my room. In all honesty, everything since the events that transpired not too long ago still seems a little hard to believe. I hope she isn't too mad with my answer. Thinking back, I neither agreed nor denied her confession. Still, after removing all thoughts from my mind, I decided to give it a go. I wanted to explore my feelings and see if I actually liked her. There was indeed the possibility of my other self manipulating my feelings in order to create a weakness for me, but I honestly didn't think this was the case. Amanda was strong. In terms of talent, she was only lagging behind Kevin. Not only that, she wasn't someone that I needed to look after in case the situation turned bad. She was someone that knew her responsibilities and knew how to act upon them. In contrast to being a burden, I thought of her as someone I could trust. After a moment's pause in my thoughts, I muttered silently to myself. I think this might be for the best. On another note, I really did need something to distract me from the things that were happening. And this was probably the best distraction out there. Is it really for the best? At that moment, a voice echoed beside me. My reaction was non-existent since I had grown accustomed to hearing that voice. While still staring toward the ceiling of my room, I replied, What do you know? I then turned my head to glance in his direction. If not for you, things wouldn't have been so complicated. If not for me, you would have died many times over. That may be true, but... Sitting up straight on the bed, I leaned my body forward a little. I would have never found myself in those situations had it not been for your influence. Like. Scratching his ear, the rattling sound of the chains binding his arms echoed out. He had a rather nonchalant look on his face. Been curious about something? As someone who knows that their actions are controlled, you don't seem to be doing much. Am I not? Massaging the bottom of my chin, I shrugged my shoulders. I guess I just realized there is no need for me to do so. No need. Yeah. Glancing his way, I just smiled at him. There were many ways for someone to deal with a manipulator. In most cases, it would be best to ignore what they say and do the opposite of what they advise, but in my case, where most of his suggestions aligned with my desires and goals, this was not an option. Thus, I decided to opt for a different method. I see. Nodding his head slowly, my other self calmly opened his mouth. So you still think that I'm your enemy? Shrugging my shoulders, I leaned back on my bed. Think what you like. All right. With a casual nod of his head, the other me turned to look toward his body, which was slowly starting to become transparent. The chains that were binding his body suddenly tightened, and a weird red hue started sprouting from them. This sudden phenomenon surprised me a bit, as I had never seen it before. What's going on? I've overstayed my stay. Staring at the chains which were binding his body, my other self turned to look in my direction. Before he could say anything else, I started speaking. Let me guess, you've used too much energy after controlling my body. Yes. As expected. There was definitely a cost that he needed to bear when controlling my body and using that skill. As a matter of fact, I also suspected there was more to the skill than it just being a simple power boost, but as he wouldn't tell me, I could only guess for now. Suddenly, more chains appeared from underneath the ground as they beckoned my other self, who stared at them without showing any signs of panic. Extending his hand, he let them bind his body completely. His body gradually started to fall toward the ground from that moment on. Within a few seconds, his head had already reached the ground, and with a simple smile on my face, I waved in his direction. Have a nice trip. Moments after my words faded, his body slowly sunk to the ground and disappeared. With my eyes lingering on the spot where he disappeared, the smile on my face slowly faded away as I softly mumbled underneath my breath. Monarch's Indifference. Chapter 544. A pity I couldn't stay up any longer. Staring at the chains that were behind his arms and legs, the other Ren's face remained impassive. While walking toward the distance, the rattling noise of the chains filled the darkness. The sound did not persist for long, as his feet soon came to a pause. An orb of white and black loomed before him in the dark space as he muttered. Not bad. As he extended his hand to touch the orb, a small gap appeared in the black threads surrounding the orb, allowing his hand to pass through briefly before he yanked out again. A sizzling sound rang in the air as the other Ren gazed at his hand, which had turned semi-transparent. With his brows furrowed, he murmured. Almost. Almost what? A familiar voice suddenly echoed out, forcing Ren to turn his head abruptly. His eyes were immediately drawn to a familiar figure. Surprise. An ambiguous smile spread on the familiar figure's face as he stared at the white orb in the distance. Pointing at it, he asked, "So is this the secret that you've been keeping away from me?" Calmly walking toward the white orb, Ren carefully inspected it as he walked around it. Throughout the entire time, the other Ren didn't say anything as he just calmly observed him. This persisted for a good minute before the other Ren eventually started to speak. "Did you plan this since the very beginning?" The moment his words faded, Ren's feet came to a pause. Turning his head to glance in his direction, Ren placed his hand underneath his chin. Planned. Caressing his chin, he thought for a moment before shaking his head. Not really. I was just testing something. Testing something? Carefully staring at Ren, the edges of the other Ren's lips curled a little. If my guess serves right, you purposely lent me your body so that you could test whether there were any drawbacks to it. That's quite the bold move. It was. Halting his feet in front of the white sphere, Ren carefully looked at it. It doesn't take a genius to understand that nothing is free in this world. For you to have gained access to such tremendous power, just a little body trauma wouldn't have been enough. Extending his hand, Ren carefully moved it toward the white sphere. As his hand approached the sphere, the black threads revolving around it suddenly gained vitality and began wiggling. Not minding it, he continued moving his hand forward. You definitely had some sort of goal planned when taking over my body, and I can finally see that it has something to do with this white orb. His hand touched the black threads and the black threads quickly escaped away, revealing a clean white outer surface. Following this, his hand slowly sunk in. Throughout the whole time, the other Ren did nothing but stare at Ren doing whatever he was doing. This didn't last for long as Ren slowly removed his hand from the orb. With a complicated look on his face, he lowered his head and murmured, "It's just as I thought." Raising his head to glance in the direction of where his other self stood, Ren's face sank a little. "That white orb is my soul, isn't it?" "It is." Without denying anything, the other Ren calmly looked toward the white orb and nodded his head. "It's as you've guessed. That is indeed your soul." Without showing any changes in his expression, Ren pointed at the black threads revolving around the white orb. What about the black threads? Them. Turning his head to stare at Ren, the other Ren calmly extended his arm. Immediately after his actions, the black threads revolving around the white orb started moving like crazy, as they quickly tried to entrap the white orb. You can say that they are a backup plan. A backup plan? Yeah. A calm nod from the other Ren preceded a sudden deepening in voice. A contingency plan in case you disappoint me. A contingency plan in case I disappoint you? Sounds like quite the plan. Rather than being surprised or angry at the other Ren's words, Ren just calmly stared at the white orb in front of him. I already have a pretty good idea of what you're trying to do. I'm glad everything worked out for the best and I found out about this now. Turning his head slightly, Ren just looked at the other Ren for a second before disappearing. I'll be seeing you soon. His last words deeply echoed throughout the black void as the other Ren stared in his direction. This persisted for a good minute before the other Ren turned to look at the white orb next to him. Whether you've figured it out now or later, it doesn't change the inevitable future. As he muttered, he raised his hand and forced the black threads around the white orb once again to go crazy. Everything is still under my control. I knew it. Slowly rising from my bed, I opened my eyes again. As I was still processing the information that I had just learned, my thoughts were rather scattered. Regardless, I was soon able to sort them out inside of my head. In the brief moment of time that I touched that white orb, I was able to finally tell how a lot of my thoughts and actions were being controlled by him. Or at least how. It's through my soul. Despite not knowing much about souls, what I gathered during that short period of time in the black void was that the black threads surrounding my soul were things my other self planted to control my soul. The more it corrupted, the more he was able to alter how I felt, how I acted, and basically what made me me. I guess power never really does come for free. It was only a hypothesis for now, but when the other me took over my body through monarch indifference or through schemes such as the Angelica incident, his true goal was to damage my soul so that he could exert his influence on it. I wasn't exactly sure what his end goal was, however. If there was one thing I knew at this moment, it was that I needed to find a way to heal my soul. This was the only way I could ensure that I would be free from his influence. I used to believe that someone's soul couldn't be healed. That, however, was based on memories in my head. The latest studies are on website. Knowing that my memories were purposely altered by him, I came to the realization that there was perhaps indeed a way for me to heal my soul. It was just that he purposely left it out since it would go against his wishes. Coming to this conclusion, I knew exactly what to do at the moment. Standing up from my bed, I took my phone out and scrolled through my contact list. Looks like I have to make a couple of calls. The next day. Whom. A yawn escaped from my mouth as I felt the morning breeze. As I stopped in front of a large gate and stared into the distance, a thin smile formed on my lips. Morning, Professor Voss. Nice to see you too. Leaning against the side of the entrance of the lock, Kevin rolled his eyes. Under his eyes were glaring black circles, clearly showing his exhaustion. He was dressed in Locke's black professor uniform, which perfectly highlighted his bulked-up body. Moving toward me, his face turned strange as he cocked his head a little. Did you dye your hair? You didn't strike me like the guy that would do that. Circumstances. Just like everyone else, I decided to be vague regarding the situation about my hair. Despite Kevin already knowing about the entity inside of me, explaining everything was going to take a long time, so I brushed the subject aside. Let's set the topic of my hair aside. Care to bring me to Douglas? Alright, but don't forget to meet me after you're done. We still need to talk about the trip. Sure. Turning around, Kevin scratched the side of his head as he entered the gates of the lock. Letting out another yawn, I followed him from behind. I hope this helps me. Last night, after making a couple of calls, I was able to make an appointment with Douglas. Given his age and experience, I thought that he might have a clue with regard to something that could heal my soul. After all, this was now my current top priority. Further adding to that, I also was planning on making a trip to the Lock's treasury, the Cube. Since I had accomplished the task they had given to me last time, it was only right that I took what was owed to me. If there was nothing that could help me with regard to souls, I still had a couple of things in mind that I really needed for myself. One such example would be a cure for all the mental problems that I was currently having. With potions no longer being as effective as they were in the past, I needed to find a solution right now. Though I wasn't sure yet, I had a feeling that if I didn't keep this in check, I might end up losing myself again. It was only just a hunch. but I didn't want to risk it. Chapter 545. Good morning, Professor. Morning, Professor. While we walked around the academy, we were greeted by students who were heading out for their classes. The students seemed unable to recognize me since my hair had changed, so most of their greetings were directed at Kevin. This was good since I didn't want to be recognized at the moment. That being said, the fact that my hair was white did attract quite a lot of attention as I felt multiple eyes pause on me whenever we went. How are we going to explain to Jean about the system and everything? It was while we were walking that Kevin spoke. Staring at him, my brows knit. What are you talking about? Didn't you previously mention that we should bring Jean with us? Oh, that. Right, I did suggest to Kevin to bring Jean with us during the trip. Although I wasn't sure how strong he was right now, he shouldn't be any weaker than Amanda, who was on the verge of breaking through too, the last time I saw her, which was yesterday. That said, it would indeed be quite troublesome to explain to him about Kevin's system and everything. Unlike Kevin, who believed most of the words I said, Jean wasn't one to be fooled easily. As much as I hated to admit it, I was afraid my bullshitting skills would not work on him. Well, we can just not tell him anything. Huh. Kevin's feet came to a sudden halt. Turning his head to glance my way, he asked. What do you mean we don't have to tell him anything? He's currently working to take over as the next guild master of the Starlight Guild. If you want him to come with us, we should at least give him a proper reason to follow us. Listening to his words, I slowly nodded my head. You're right. His words made sense. Just like Amanda, Jean had a lot of responsibilities for himself. If we suddenly sprang the idea of going to another world to him without a proper explanation, he might end up refusing our offer. Although I knew a couple of other people that could replace him, ideally I wanted Jean to be the one that came with us. Considering his skill set, he was the most appropriate person to come with us. Squinting my eyes, I asked. What is the time difference between here and the place we're going? Let me check. Waving his hand in the air, Kevin carefully looked at the air in front of him. To be honest, had it not been for the fact that I knew he had a system, I would have thought he had some mental problems as he tapped and swiped the air randomly. It was quite a comical scene. This persisted for a good couple of minutes before Kevin turned around and informed me. The time difference between here and there is about half of that of Amora. So about 5 times? Yeah. 5 times, huh? This is a lot longer than I expected. Even though I didn't know how long I would be away, I didn't think it would be a good idea to take another long trip after just getting back. I might end up suffering quite a bit before leaving. Mother aside, it is also quite a pity to leave Earth. Presently, the best place to train was on Earth. Although time flowed slower on the planet that I was just about to go to, there was a major flaw in the place, and it was the fact that it lacked mana. Just like the demon world, the place was filled with demonic energy. Compared to Earth, whose mana density is increasing day by day, the time difference advantage would simply be negated by the fact that the mana there was thin. The same went for Amora, which unfortunately also had little to no mana in the air. Had the two plants had more mana, I would have without a doubt spent my time training over there. What a pity. While my thoughts paused there, I had a sudden thought as I opened my mouth and voiced it out. Wait, if the time is 5 times slower, why don't we just kidnap Jean? Huh. Kevin's face changed the moment those words escaped from my mouth. Snapping his head to look at me, he frowned. What are you talking about? Don't misunderstand. Raising my hands, I quickly explained to Kevin my thoughts. Since it will be troublesome to convince Jean and even tell him about your secrets, might as well just open the portal and send him in before he knows it. Coma back before his guild members notices something is wrong. It's not like this trip will be a long one. A dumbfounded look crossed Kevin's face as he stared at me. Are you serious? Just an option. As I approached the enormous structure in the distance, I shrugged my shoulders. The goal of the operation, from what he told me, was to prevent the mana on the planet from corrupting and becoming demonic. If everything played out well, then I didn't see why we would need a lot of time to do it. We just had to find the device that converted the mana and destroy it. Furthermore, since the system judged that the difficulty was around, it shouldn't be too hard for us to deal with it. Who knows, perhaps I might even find a way to break through to rank. Though I doubted it since it was actually hard to break through. Visit for a better user experience. Thinking about breaking through to rank, I let out a long sigh. Although I was closer to it than ever, it still felt as though I was quite far away from it. I'm probably still a year or two away from breaking through. Sounded slow, but by then I would be around 23 years old. A 22-year-old rank hero. The news would probably shake the whole domain, as not even Monica, who was considered one of the greatest prodigies humanity had ever seen, had accomplished such feats. If I don't remember incorrectly, Monica reached it when she was just 25. For me to do it at 22/23, it would probably alarm a lot of people. As I imagine Monica's face once I beat her record, the edges of my lips curled. "We're here." Jolting me out of my thoughts was Kevin's voice as we stopped in front of a large wooden door. "The headmaster is already waiting for you, so all you have to do is just knock on the door." Glancing at the door for a second, Kevin soon turned around. "About your proposal of kidnapping Jean, tell me more about it later. I've got classes to teach now. I'll see you later. Bye." Waving Kevin goodbye, I turned to glance at the door in front of me. Without wasting any time, I raised my hand and knocked on the door. Knock. Mox. "Come in." Following my actions, a familiar aged voice echoed out from behind the door. Without hesitation, I twisted the doorknob and entered the room. Clank. As soon as I opened the door, an old wooden smell filled the room, while sunlight filtered through the large window at the end. Sitting in front of it and behind a large worded desk was Douglas, who slowly stood up and smiled in my direction. "Haven't seen you in quite a while." His aged and tranquil voice echoed throughout the room. Extending his hand, he pointed at the leather chair in front of his desk. "Have a seat for now. I heard you wanted to talk to me. What do you need?" Smiling at him, I complied with his request and sat down on the chair. Brushing my hair up, I thought for a moment before I decided to go straight to the point. "I need a favor. Do you have anything that can heal the soul?" Right as those words escaped from my mouth, Douglas's face changed as he asked. "The latest understudies are on website. Did something happen to your soul?" "Sort of." I nodded my head before explaining. "I sustained a bit of damage to my soul and I need to find a way to heal it." Massaging his long beard, a deep and contemplative look appeared on Douglas's face as he mused to himself. His brows soon furrowed tightly. "Something that can heal your soul, huh?" Seconds passed and soon minutes passed as the frown on Douglas's face deepened. The longer time passed, the less hope I had that Douglas would find a way to heal me. "Looks like I will have to ask someone else." Douglas wasn't the only person that I could ask with regards to possible news about something that could heal my soul. There were other people I could ask. Of which there was Kevin and possibly even Gervis. Though making contact with him would prove to be quite difficult. "Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like I can be of help, Ren." It was then that Douglas shook his head in disappointment. With a smile on my face, I waved my hand. "It's okay, but I do know someone that can actually help you." But halfway through my sentence, Douglas suddenly said something that immediately caught my interest. "You know someone that can help?" "Yes." Douglas nodded his head before his face turned weird as he looked at me. "You might not like it, but if there is one guy that can help you, it's probably him." Listening to his next words, I suddenly had a bad feeling. However, as I thought about how urgent the matter was, I reaffirmed my resolve. "It's okay as long as he can help me, then I can do anything." "You sure?" "Sure. Don't tell me I didn't warn you." A grin appeared on Douglas's face as he caressed his beard and leaned back on his chair. "If you're looking for a way to heal your soul, then the individual you should contact is none other than Octavius Hull. The strongest human in the human domain." "Ah." A strange sound escaped from my mouth as my face hardened. "Seriously,